Oh, I know it's been a minute. I gotta tell you what, I cannot lie. I have had a hard time doing these videos. I am so doomer pilled, black pilled, just because like our local government is crap, and I gotta watch these fucking retards talk about community fairs. This is how crazy. Okay, hold on, let me show you. So it was originally going to be 41 minutes, but someone put the camera on early for 10 minutes. This will be like right over a half an hour, this whole video. So let's just get into it. I have no idea. I forgot what they're talking about. Early intervention planning.
Calling. I cannot say her last name, so I apologize, but Kate is here from the Early Intervention Planning Council to talk to us about the state of child permanency here in Marion County. So, Kate.
By the way, only 4 members of the committee, no Republicans.
Kate, if I will turn it over to you, you want to give your presentation, and then we'll have questions for you at the end.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Okay, I'll make sure.
Sounds great.
I'll try not to hit this too many times. I've got a laptop and a booklet and all kinds of things up here. Thank you so much for taking the time still to hear more about the work that we've been doing. My name is Kate Rollicke, and I'm the program director at the Marion County Commission on Youth. I'll give you a little bit more background about McCoy and what we do.
Damn.
But I'm here on behalf of the Early Intervention Planning Council. Usually I present one time a year for the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee around the budget time. So it's really awesome to be here and to get connected to another committee and more counselors. I really appreciate that.
I'm running out of Jolly Ranchers. There's a problem. This is a problem.
Please, thank you. So a little bit more about McCoy. If you're not familiar with us, our mission is to champion the positive development of youth through community and systems change, and our work focuses in 3 primary areas right now: creating, impacting, and strengthening systems that influence youth, supporting the youth-serving community and equipping youth-serving organizations with knowledge and resources, and empowering youth and strengthening families by engaging community building and prevention work. And McCoy is a proud partner with the members of the Early Intervention Planning Council to present this information and continue working towards a better future for youth in our community. Next slide. So the City County Council of Indianapolis, Marion County established the Early Intervention Planning Council in 2005.
Oh boy, Maggie Lewis is on it. Go figure, huh?
And McCoy.
Wait, Paula N.A. is too? Got here. Larry Young, Ben Tapper. What the freak is this? All this crap. It's a scam.
He's been the designated convener of the council since 2009. In this capacity, McCoy works with the council and its members' organizations to study the complex issues that contribute to child and family involvement in the child welfare and legal systems, and develop strategies for preventing that involvement. The purpose of this report is to collect and share a consolidated data-centric view of the current state of child permanency in Marion County, Indiana. This council has identified child permanency as a critical component in positive youth development and priority goal for early intervention and prevention. By understanding the data of this report, we hope to develop a common understanding of the state of child permanency in our county. So the systems that support our children are complex, involving many groups and organizations, beginning with the birth family. While children who lack permanency represent only a
The birth family.
small part of this system, the safety net of the CHINS process provides a is critical to support our community overall. Sorry, I'm trying to make my notes a little bit bigger and the slide a little bit smaller. The Early Intervention Planning Council is a unique group of community leaders representing many of the diverse community sectors that make up the system of care for children and families in our community. Based on the data presented in the report and the discussions that we continue to have as a result of this work, there are 4 key goals or takeaways that we've identified. First, prevention is better than intervention. Decades of research have identified the essential elements for positive youth development and the protective factors that could not only mitigate the harm of child maltreatment, but potentially prevent it from happening in the first place. Second, we need to identify pathways to better data and root causes. We hope this report is a starting place for the conversations and work needed to close the gaps in data and to identify the specific root causes in Marion County so that we can work together to develop system-level strategies for community-wide impact. Third, our prevention strategies need to prioritize positive youth development concepts, well-researched, proven strategies that help create safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments for our children. And finally, as the previous slide indicated, we need to work together as a system to build collective impact based on shared goals and coordinated actions. No single agency, organization, or sector of the community can reduce the number of children who lack permanency in Marion County. It will require the participation of the entire system.
All right, pipe down. All right, so 2023, the revenue was $1.7 million. Of that $1.7 million, 10% went to the executive compensation, and then the other 29% of it went to other salaries and wages. So you have over 40% just going to pay. That's it. And then the other 60% is going to random crap. Let's see, contributions. All right, that was the revenue. Notable expenses. All right. Access and debts. All right. $1.3 million in contributions. On proceeds, nothing there. Net fundraising. Okay.
Originally, I had videos of interviews that we've been doing to collect stories of this shared lived experience. I'm happy to share those via email in some way because it might be challenging to do it tech-wise, but I can also try to integrate those into the presentation as well. So the report that follows provides data and context to help build understanding about the state of child permanency in Marion County. As much as possible, we are sharing data specific to the county. However, when that's unavailable, we share state data to serve as a proxy about what might be happening in our county. And we also try to keep our focus on the year 2023, but at times have to present 2022 data. Okay, so this report focuses on children in Marion County who lack permanency, primarily children in need of services. However, the report provides a high-level profile of the child population in Marion County to provide context for the issue of permanency. 15.1% of Indiana's child population lives in Marion County, over 240,000 children. Overall, Marion County's child population is younger than the statewide child population and is also more racially and ethnically diverse, as 69% of children in Marion County are non-white.
Yeah.
The economic situation of households in Marion County is challenging.
How are you going to blame white people now, huh?
Compared to the state overall. On average, households are poorer and experiencing higher costs. Again, Marion County is represented, and over 5,000 children in Marion County lack permanency. This could be a result of housing insecurity. In 2023, 4,500 children in the county were unhoused. Over 700 children were in juvenile detention in 2023. But this report specifically looks at the 2,169 children in need of services, or CHINs. While this population may seem small, Marion County has a disproportionate 18% of CHINs statewide.
Yeah, maybe because they live in a shitty house. I don't know. I have never looked into CHINs. I heard it a lot during the the session. Never really looked into it. Maybe I will next year. I don't know.
So according to Indiana Code, a child with a CHIN status is a child younger than 18 who's experiencing one or more of certain conditions listed in statute. Conditions like abuse, neglect, endangerment of self or others, or a child born with a substance-related challenge at time of birth, such as fetal alcohol syndrome. The full list of conditions can be found in Appendix C of the report or Indiana Code. And in determining a CHIN status, an agency must believe the situation is unlikely to be remedied without the explicit intervention of the court. Okay, so time for lots of graphs. On average, over the course of 2023, there were 2,170 CHINs in Marion County, represented by the blue bars, including 934 new CHINs cases represented by the orange bars. You'll notice that the blue bars are much taller than the orange bars, and that's because the total CHINs cases gives us an idea of how many children are currently engaged with the system, and that number remains higher than new cases due to the length of time these cases remain open. An average of 78 new CHINS cases, the orange bars, were filed each month in 2023, but you'll see a peak at 128 in August, which is when school starts. So taking a closer look at the CHINS population of Marion County, we see a disproportionate representation of Black children designated as CHINS.
You don't say.
8% compared to the
You don't say.
overall Black child population of 31%.
Hold on. It feels like you skipped over something. Hold on.
48% compared to the overall Black child population of 31%.
The CHINS population, even though the overall child population is 31%. Oh, okay. Okay, so still Black. Okay. Well, you know what they say. Always bet on Black.
And this table identifies the circumstances associated with removal in 2022 at the state level. Most cases that result in removal from the household involve neglect and/or parental substance misuse. Note that multiple circumstances may be associated with a child's removal, so those percentages won't total 100%. The interviews that I have videos of that we're working on the storytelling component bring up issues of domestic violence, neglect, at very, very young ages. Both Jackie and Melina were removed from that household when they were either 2 or 3 years old. And so the circumstances surrounding these CHINS status and the removal are very complex and often multi-generational. Regarding permanency, close to 1,000 children were removed from their homes in 2023 in Marion County, and that's an increase of about 18% from 2022. We don't know what caused this increase. However, it does follow a statewide trend where there was a 26% increase in the number of children removed.
Remember, these are also like 3 years old. This is 3-year-old data, 2 or 3-year-old data. So she said it was going to be 2022 and some of it would be 2023. So let's just go with 3-year-old data.
So now that we understand a little more about the CHINS population in Marion County, we'll look at the data regarding their permanency and living situation. Once identified, most CHINS are removed for out-of-home placement. In 2023, approximately 77% of CHINS were placed out of home compared to 23% in-home. And like national data, in the state of Indiana, young children under the age of 7 represent almost half of out-of-home placements, and those under the age of 3 years represent a disproportionate 25% of placements.
That's crazy.
Younger children are most likely to be impacted by the trauma associated with home removal, as they are separated from primary caregivers during a critical time in their development.
Yeah, but do you guys, all right, so there was that little girl, I think she was 5 years old, maybe 3 years old, and her dad was like swinging her around by like a makeshift noose around her neck. Then she ended up dying. And, you know, the big question is like, what the hell happened? Because the mom reported a bunch of times. She even tried to get a protection order of the judge. Judge said no. And then everybody's trying to figure out like what the fuck happened. And then Adam Krupp's brother, who's the director of, well, Adam Krupp is the director of Indiana Child Services, and his brother was shilling for Ryan Mears and the judge. A real piece of shit, by the way. Absolute piece of shit. So if that's running in the family, guess what, everybody? It's going to get way worse in Indiana now that we know that the Krupp brothers are on the Ryan Mears and the Holcomb train. It's totally over. Get ready to get more mogged by the left. Saying like, oh, I thought Republicans were pro-life. I thought they cared about children. And then for some fucked up reason, Mike Braun appoints an accountant for the director of child services. Very weird. Bad. Braun L for sure.
And when we look at the race and ethnicity data for out-of-home placements, we find something we may not expect. While there are a disproportionate number of Black children designated as CHINS in Marion County, that's the tallest orange bar in the graph, this does not translate to out-of-home placements, which skews towards white children, the tallest gray bar in the graph. More analysis and data are needed to understand why.
Haven't you been around since like 1993? What are you talking about? Oh, we just need more money.
So now we'll take a closer look at what we mean by out-of-home placements. Out-of-home placements are categorized in 4 ways. Relative homes include placement with another family member or relative outside of the primary home environment. Non-relative foster care is a court-monitored service where foster caregivers typically undergo licensing and training so that they're better equipped to provide that support. Residential programs house and care for youth that are not in relative care or foster care, and these programs must satisfy key conditions to be designated as qualified under the Family First Preservation Act. And finally, the other categorization covers the children and youth who may be in a hospital, placed out of state, or other settings or situations that best meet their needs on an individual case-by-case basis. Most CHINs requiring out-of-home placements are placed either in the home or relative or non-relative foster care. In 2023, there were a total of 767 new CHINs in out-of-home placements, and the greatest portion of those placements, 43%, were with relatives, followed closely by 37% in foster care.
That's crazy.
As we consider ways to mitigate the negative impact of out-of-home placements on CHINs, it is important to consider the potential disruption created by the need to place children outside of their communities. This disruption likely creates the need to change schools, make new friends, find new systems of care for these children. Such a placement may still be preferred if it means keeping the child with relatives. This graph highlights the percentage of placements made in the same county as the case was initiated. Unfortunately, this percentage has declined considerably over the past 10 years. In Marion County, however, the child welfare system is still able to keep more children close to their original community more often than for the state overall. However, Marion County has significantly more neighborhoods and communities in the geographical county, which represents different challenges. Now we're going to look at the data about how long children are in placement and the stability of that placement. The average length of stay for a child placed out of home in 2023 was 719 days. That's 23.6 months, or close to 2 years.
We know how to do math.
CHINs placed in residential care had the longest average length of stay, and CHINs in non-relative foster care spent an average of 81 days longer in placement than those placed in a relative's home.
You know, this is where like the far right of me comes into play. I've always said this, like, you know, I'm not left at all. I'm like either center or I'm right, or sometimes I'm very hard right. And this is one of them for sure. When you have these scumbag adults and then they get knocked up by some fucking bar person and then they end up having a kid and the kid's all fucked up and they end up getting abused or neglected. And then what happens with the kid? They end up turning out to be a big a scumbag as well. And like the far right of me is just like, yeah, you know what? I think that we should just start castrating people, making sure that like these people can't have children at all. I saw like, if you guys ever seen like Man in a High Castle, shit like that, where it's like, oh boy, is it snowing? No, it's Tuesday. They take out the retards and like the disabled because they don't want anything like hogging down the healthcare system. You know, I'm not saying it's good, but you understand, like, we have reached a point now, like, we can't do anything unless we make a hard 180 of whatever we're doing now. We live in just a garbage society. Oh, y'all, also, like, the CHINs cases, is there like I don't know if they had it. I'll have to go back after the video is done, but can you see like if any of them are from foreigners or illegals?
And placement stability is another critical factor to consider. With each move, the risk of negative outcomes increase. Repeated moves may compound the adverse experiences a child may have already experienced prior to removal. 31% of non-relative foster care children in Indiana experienced more than 2 placements in 2021, meaning their living arrangements changed at least 3 times that year. This could reflect not only a change in living environment, but a change in school, neighborhood, and support systems. The longer they are in placement, the more likely it is children will be moved to new settings. It also makes it less likely that they will be reunified with their biological family. Both Jackie and Melina, who shared their stories with me, experienced multiple movements, and I mean dozens of time, back with the family, back in foster care, moved to a relative, back in foster care, back with the family, back in foster care. And when I asked Melina specifically, who's about 20 years old, how many schools she went to, she couldn't give me the exact number, but she knew that she had gone to a different school every single year that she was growing up. And I asked her what impact that had on her, and she said it was difficult to make friends. But moreover, now that she's becoming an adult, she's recognizing through her own work to address her own trauma that she has a tough time building relationships with people in general.
Yeah,
because
no
she
shit.
views people as disposable, because she never had the chance growing up in her own development to build those nurturing relationships.
You know, sometimes it's not a bad thing. Realizing that everybody's a piece of shit. I'm just throwing that out there.
Finally, we can look at how permanency is achieved following placement, which can take different forms. Overall, reunification with their biological family is the prioritized goal. However, when that is not a safe option for the child, adoption or guardianship are also options. In some cases, older children may age out of the system, losing access to a number of services that are provided through the child welfare system. When that is the case, community organizations like Foster Success can step in to help fill the gaps and support that young person into independent living. However, if that young person doesn't get connected to that community organization, they're left on their own to navigate that transition. In 2023, over 900 CHINS cases were closed, resulting in permanent placement, primarily through adoption or reunification with their birth families, or in fewer cases through guardianship. But the graph, we can see that more cases were closed through adoption in Marion County and fewer cases closed through reunification than in the state. Okay.
Man. Let's just go back to what it has to be, though. It's abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, a child endangering their own health or the health of another individual, a child whose parent, guardian, or custodian failed to participate in full disciplinary proceeding, a child labeled as missing, a child with a disability who is deprived of necessary nutrition or medical intervention, or a child born with substance-related challenges at time of birth, a crackhead baby, fetal alcohol syndrome, and then going back into that home.
So understanding the relative circumstances faced by families and children in Marion County is an important piece of the puzzle in reducing the number of children who lack permanency in a meaningful and sustainable way. In disciplines like public health and social work, these circumstances are called risk and protective factors. The end of the report briefly looks at Marion County through three important filters related to the risk factors of child maltreatment: economic situation, which points to child poverty; incidents of adverse childhood experiences within families resulting in generational trauma; and the availability of a supportive system of care with resources like healthcare. As a community, we can work to understand and mitigate these risk factors. We can also work to promote promising and evidence-based solutions for protective factors. We view this report as a starting place, and there are many aspects to consider as we move forward. First, it's clear through the presentation of this report that we don't have all of the data that could give us a more complete picture of child permanency in Marion County. I think after putting this report together, I'm left with more questions than answers in some situations. Whether tracking, capturing, or reporting data, we need more clarity and consistency across the system so we can begin to understand the data trends and get a more comprehensive picture. Second, we know that shifting to earlier, more informed intervention will result in improved outcomes. Better data can provide earlier awareness of emerging issues, allowing us to connect families to resources and support, utilizing the whole system to support families, and ultimately stabilizing a child's living situation. Third, while the data is limited, we see disproportionality when it comes to race and ethnicity in both CHINS designation and in out-of-home placement, though maybe not in the way that we expect. We need to recognize and understand the racial and cultural biases that may exist in our systems and the circumstantial factors that may differ across cultures and even neighborhoods in Marion County.
Hey, wait a minute. I was told Black culture is the best culture. That is so weird.
Digging deeper for a fact-based assessment will lead us to better actions and outcomes for all of our children. And finally, we know that
Oh, my
removing a
God.
child from their home has an impact on them and their development, but also on the family unit and the community at large. There is an opportunity to study the impact on children at each stage of this process and also consider the multi-generational impacts that can occur. The takeaway goals from this report can help us explore those areas of consideration further by putting prevention first, building better pathways to data and root causes, prioritizing positive youth development, and working together to build collective impact. And over the coming months, the Early Intervention Planning Council will continue to present the findings of this report, building understanding across the system of care so we can begin taking collective actions on those goals together.
Basically, we need more money because we need more data, even though like 40% of the money that we have goes towards paying other people.
So I shared a little bit about Jackie and Melina's stories, but they represent only 2 of the 2,000 children designated as CHINs in Marion County. I also think they highlight important ways that we can make a difference in their lives as a community. I hope that this presentation has raised some questions and sparked some ideas for impact. And if you have groups that you're connected with who you think should hear this information, please connect with me. I've shared my email address. I'd be happy to present to more groups as well. Thank you for your time this evening, and hopefully we still have some time for questions. I think we do, because this is all we're doing, right?
Yes, we're good.
Yay.
We're good. Thank you. Okay, before we do questions, I would like, Councillor Cahill, could you go ahead and introduce yourself and district for me?
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Derek Cahill, District 23. Sorry.
Oh, finally, a Republican showed up. Oh, Keith Graves left? Really? He didn't even make it through 20 minutes? Are you kidding me? He's just collecting his check.
I have a question.
Oh, and by the way, Allie is looking more and more like she has AIDS. You know, sorry, Allie. I know that you're probably losing all this weight because you're going to be running for a higher office in the next year or two. But either you look like a mess, all right? You look like a grunge clown. And there's nothing that you need to look more feminine, okay? Because right now you look the opposite. You look like a boy. And it's a little bit disturbing to me.
I'm always self-centered in this space, and I have a child with a disability. What happens when a child so there's 2 issues, right? You could have a child with a diagnosed disability, all sorts of different physical, my son's autistic, you could have intellectual disabilities, you can have all this kind of stuff, and then you have kids who are too young or not yet diagnosed, right? And we know systems, when kids are being bounced around, speaking of autistic kids, if people are not there to see the patterns, they may not be able. How does the system, 1, support getting kids support? And then 2, how could we collectively do better to help support children? All these children are vulnerable, but children with additional, because all of life is intersectional, right? Additional needs.
Okay.
Yeah, I think those are really great questions. That isn't something that we explored in depth in this report. We took a very high-level view at the data. I can say that in this report, it isn't mentioned per se, but in statute, not meeting the needs of a child with a disability could get to the point where that child then becomes designated as a CHINS, right? So as a family or a caregiver is not meeting those needs or is not getting that child connected to supports, that could result in a CHINS designation. Once that child is in the CHINS system, or if it comes to light that child has been diagnosed while in the system, we don't have that information. And I don't know if there's data that exists, but it's certainly something that as the Early Intervention Planning Council continues to work on this and talk about this, that we could connect with the Department of Child Services to get answers.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you to find that, or you guys do so much anyway. But if there's ever, that's something I'm very passionate about, and I know there's other counselors who are also passionate about, that if you ever are looking at assistance or support in that, please make us aware.
Yeah.
Because all of this is absolutely heartbreaking, and I know personally, all I can think about is my little boy and what kind of how horrible a system. It's not how horrible this situation is. You guys are doing the best. We're doing the best we can in the system, hopefully. Yeah. So please, as a mom, let us know All the counselors, that's why we run, because we passionately care about this city, and that means every person, all of our kiddos. So
Listen, Democrats do not give a fuck about Indy, okay? Not one bit.
thank you. I have so many thoughts and questions, but I have a feeling a lot of them have to settle, and I'll reach back out to you. And I would like to connect you. I work at the YMCA, and I would very much like to connect you with our family and child services, because I know we do get foster kids who pop into our ELCs and all that kind of stuff, and how we can better support them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselors, any questions? Counselor Gibson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And this is very informative, and I think it really clearly indicates a need for our youth. I was looking at the data when you mentioned the data in particular about the CHINs, and for 2023, you got 726 kids that were in juvenile. Mm-hmm. Is that part of the CHINs number, or that's a separate statistic?
They're not, there's overlap. They're not mutually exclusive, because in some cases there may be a dual status, which means that a child has a CHINS designation and they are engaged in the juvenile system. And so those boxes of that graphic
Could overlap
slightly.
Okay. And that's an annual number, or is that just on an average? What does that 726 mean?
That's an annual number from 2023.
Okay. Now, the CHINS numbers seems to be very high in Marion County, and I wonder if there's a pattern here with the repeat families possibly? Is anyone studying that, I guess, to figure out if is that, I guess, if you experience that type of, neglect, you chances are repeating it if it's not corrected. I would assume, but I don't know that to be true. I guess any kind of studies to show us that?
Well, so my understanding of the data is that the CHINS number, so the total CHINS number, each of that 2,169 is a unique case, and that case can remain open essentially indefinitely until that child ages out or is adopted, until that case is closed, which is why we see such a much more significant total CHINS number, because they're being carried over month after month, year after year, because the case is still open, but it's still an individual case of one child. However, we don't know if in that case that child is being placed back in the home versus being placed back in foster care, being moved to relative care, being put back in the home. It bounces, and that's what I learned from Jackie and Melina, is that while the case remains open, their placement is changing pretty constantly, year after year, month after month, potentially. The new cases, which on that one bar graph were the tiny, tiny little orange bars,
small number, yeah.
It's so much lower because those are just the new cases being introduced. So when you see an orange bar, let's say in August, now in September, those orange cases have now been put in the blue bar because that case is open. And so that's why we see such a disparate.
You said the average case lasts about 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, length of placement.
A placement,
But that doesn't mean that the case has necessarily been closed.
Got you. So they could be placed but still have a CHINS case to 18 years old. How is foster care? Is that adequately staffed and the right type of matches for children to help them with a new
That's something we didn't get too in the weeds on in this report. I don't know if that's a proper phrase to use, but I know that there are groups and organizations that have been actively looking, especially in regards to recruiting more families or more people to be foster care providers who reflect the community of children who need, to be placed in foster care. However, I would say that's a pocket of data that we don't know. We don't have access to that data.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth us trying to figure out how to get access to the data. But also, I wonder how we can maybe partner with foster agencies to make sure we're recruiting or trying to attract I guess, more options for children to be successful.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm sure there has to be like a total number of foster care providers because it's a licensure, it's a license. However, what kind of information is attached to that license in terms of age, racial demographic, locations, you know, that's when it, again, like I felt like I walk away with more questions.
I bet.
Because when you start looking at the data, you go, well, what about this? Or what about this? And then you realize, oh, well, we don't have access to that information, or that information isn't even collected.
Got it. And finally, Madam Chair, I think it'd be nice to know if there's other cities in America that's got this foster care better than we do. I don't think we have the right. I want to shout out to our foster care parents. I know they're doing a fabulous job in most cases, but I don't think we are constantly looking like the demographic that they're serving. And I don't know if we need to look like that necessarily, but I think there has to be some cultural awareness about how to make someone feel and believe that they can be successful despite what they've been through.
Shut the fuck up. Oh my God, there's not enough black kids getting adopted.
And so I don't know, I think we could do a better job of recruiting foster parents. And that's just my little small view of the world, but
Well, go ahead and adopt one there, buddy.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselors Cahill or Jones? Cahill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I wanted to echo what Vice President Brown said about the children with disabilities, that I certainly would be interested in the data if it ever becomes available. I think I would encourage, it's not perfect because, as was mentioned, I mean, in some cases, there's a lack of diagnosis, right? And you can't classify it all. But the State Department of Education has a pretty significant data warehouse that they can link to other state databases. And because of sort of their unique nature, they're able to bypass some of the stuff like FERPA because they can provide you aggregated data. So that might be an avenue, because as an example, they have access to the IEP data for everyone in the state. So they can, while they can't tell you this child and this specific, they can marry it up at a high level and then give you the statistics as output. But thank you for everything that you're doing. This is very heartbreaking work a lot of times, but important. And you know, every one of these numbers is a child that's suffering. So thank you.
Counselor Jones, just not to put you on the spot, but you're the last one left if you have any questions.
Just thank you for your work. We appreciate it, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I do have copies of the report if anybody would.
I was going to ask if I could I took one to work and it's already disappeared, so I was going to ask if I could have it.
Yeah, I think we mailed copies, but please share with your friends, share with your colleagues. We would appreciate that.
Well, Kate, thank you so very, very much for this presentation. Thank you for the work that you and McCoy do, and everyone on the I keep wanting to say EPIC, but it's EIPC. And I thank my fellow counselors for being here tonight. We never hit the number needed for quorum, but there was proposal number 48. So we can't vote on that. We don't have quorum. So we will move that on to the June agenda or reassess proposal 48. But with that, if I see no objections, we're going to go ahead and end the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
There we go. So we learned something a little bit today about the chins and what's going on. Because, you know, I follow last year, me and the boys and the girls over at Indie Reporter were following the State House stuff, and chins was brought up a lot. And I never really knew what it was, but now that I know what actually defines it, I have it right here. It's very fascinating. And I think Julie McGuire was a part of the talks for most of it. But I always said, when I get to a point where I'm financially like ready to go, when I'm like very close to retiring, I'm gonna buy a bunch of children. Like Josh Lowry, he ran for office, and he bought a black kid. So I'm thinking like I'm gonna buy a black kid, a brown kid. I'm probably a Mexican, I think, and then definitely gonna have to buy a white. Maybe a Hawaiian, maybe an Eskimo. And then I'm just gonna put on like a World War II reenactment, and I'm just gonna travel all over the country with these children, and we're gonna put on this whole show. I think that sounds like a good time. I can't wait for this to be clipped in the future. It's gonna be so funny. Anyway, that's it for me. Until next time.